plowing, tilling, etc. So what will happen if the yield is not good? If there are insects, if there are unnecessary weeds, if there are birds, if there are animals who are attacking the plants and the crops and they are spoiling the crops. So we really need to protect the crops, right? So the practice of protecting the crop to get good yield from different agents, is known as crop protection. This is very important. This is the most important part because if the farmers have put in so much labor, so much time, so much of hard work, so much money. After that, if a pest comes or a weed grows unnecessarily, or there's a plant disease, and plant diseases are normally, very, very detrimental. If it attacks one plant, it spreads in no time, right? So that's the reason why one has to be very aware. What is weeding?
May I?
Okay.
Weeding is the process of removing weeds through manual processes or through weedicides.
So what are weeds?
And weeds are unwanted substances that grow
Substances?
with the plants.
No.
Not substances. Unwanted plants.
Correct. They are basically unwanted plants. Okay.
And grow with the healthy plants to compete with them for the nutrients and sunlight.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So first we'll come to weeding. Akshat, can you please read out the first 2 points?
Okay, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Weeding. First point. Weeds are plants other than crop plants growing along with the crop. Point number 2. Weeds grow vigorously and draw more nutrition from the soil than the crop plants.
Yeah, can you please explain?
Ma'am, weeds are can be like the unwanted plants which naturally grow along with crops and are needed and these need to be taken out for the better yield of crops because as explained in the second point, these grow vigorously and they need more nutrition to grow and they might take much more nutrition from the soil and and might not give enough to the crops.
Good. So basically these are unwanted plants which demand a lot of attention. They demand a lot of attention and all the fertilizer, manure which the farmer has put in so much effort in, it's being all taken away by the weeds. And it's been seen that the weeds grow healthier than the crops. And that's really sad. Right? It's really sad when the weeds grow healthier than as they said, they compete with the original crops for the best of nutrition, best of water, sunlight, and they're very aggressive in nature. They grow really fast. They grow really fast and really quick. Correct? Okay. So this makes, okay, Kirtana, can you please read the last 3 points?
This makes the soil poor in minerals and deprives the crop of its mineral needs. They also block full sunlight and air from the crops. The process of removal of weeds from the crop fields is known as weeding.
Correct. So basically, as we said, it makes the soil poor, right? Poor as in, less in oxygen, less in nutrients. And that's really very detrimental for it because, the farmer has put in the fertilizers. For example, if he has the same example, if he has put 100 kgs of fertilizer, so that gets divided. He knows that he has put, for example, 100 kind of, saplings of paddy. So, this would be like basically, how much? 1 kg per sapling of nutrients, right? Over a period of 1 month. So for example, if there are weeds, even if there are 25 weeds, so just imagine this 100 gets divided by 125 plants. So obviously this, the crop will get less fertilizer, less water, less sunlight, less manure. So by hook or by crook, these weeds need to be taken off. right? It could be a manual process by where, plain and simple through hands and through fingers, you pluck out the weeds, but it depends on the number of weeds. If it's less, then you can use your manual way. If it's much higher in number, then you will have to use a weedicide. There are many other ways. So, Naisha, can you please read out the names?
Some common weeds: Chenopodium, also known as Betua; Amaranthus, known as Julia; Convolvulus; Argamon, known as Piladatura; Datura; Alfalfa; wild pea, wild oat, and other grasses.
Correct. So these are the different kinds of weeds which are very commonly found. And we Indians, we don't spare anything. So, these weeds are also used to cook, and to consume. So Bethua is a very commonly used green leaf, which is used as consumed as a sag, right? Datura, is a poisonous plant. It's a weed which is very poisonous. So this has been completely cut off, and this grows very aggressively. Even if you cut off, it will grow branches and then again come out. So it has to be uprooted completely, right? Alfalfa, wild oats, these are all consumed in different forms. So there are villagers who convert them, they pluck it out and they uproot it and they consume it as a food. Okay. Now, what are the weeding methods? Kavya, can you please read out?
Weeding methods. Weeding by hands. Pulling out weeds with hands is the most common method. Weeding by herbicides. Herbicides are chemicals which are poisonous for weeds but do not affect crop plants. Weeding by biological control. Some worms and insects have a special affinity for certain weeds on which they flourish, eating and killing them without harming the crop plants.
Correct. So basically, when we say weeding by hands, as the picture shows, where a person, depending on the number, one can actually, with their hands, but one has to be careful not to leave any remains behind. It has to be completely, uprooted right from the roots. A little bit of it is left, and weeds, they are, as I said again and again, they're extremely, extremely aggressive. You leave it little behind and then they'll grow out of that. Most of the weeds also have this vegetative property, so they have this propensity to grow again. Herbicides. So what is the meaning of herbicides? Herby means herbs. Sides means to kill, right? To kill, sides. Like we have herbicides. These are basically weedicides, to kill the weeds. So, botanists, they have identified certain chemical compounds which have the, propensity to kill certain weeds. So what they would do is that they would just spray those chemicals thoroughly on the crops, all the crops, but the crops will not die. What will die is the weeds. So this, has to be very, very carefully done, because what if by mistake, some chemical is harmful for the crop, then the crop will be damaged. The crop will also get poisoned, and this is not a very suitable thing to do, because after all, you're spraying the entire area of land, right? Entire agricultural land where you're spraying the weeds as well as you're spraying the crops. So it's not very desirable to use this chemical way. This, I feel, as per me, is the best way, using a biological control. What is a biological control? So what you do is that you identify certain insects and just leave those insects on the crop, on the field. So they would have, you'll have to identify, of course. So these insects, would identify those weeds and they would start consuming them. And what will happen? So the moment they start consuming them, the weed will obviously, first the crop insects will eat away all the leaves, so there's no way to for photosynthesis, the plant will slowly die its own natural death, right? So in this way, the crops also have not been damaged, because maybe, if it's for a paddy plant, these crops are not interested to eat paddy plant leaves. They're only interested to eat alfalfa plant leaves, which is a weed. So you'll have to identify what weed has grown and which insect can be used. A wrong choice can destroy the crops.
Protection from intruders. Grazing animals. Fence made from barbed wire or spiny, thorny hedge plants is raised around the field to restrict the entry of intruders.
Right. So basically, grazing animals, because the villagers will just leave the cattle just like that for grazing. And the cattle being cattle, they would not know what to eat, what not to eat. They would just come near the crops and damage the crops. So the best way is to put a spiny or a thorny hedge, to raise spiny or thorny hedge plants, right? Hedge plants as in, which would be at a height so that the cattle doesn't come close by, right? So with that, the entry of the intruders, especially the animals, can be restricted. The second, yeah, Arjun. Okay, Arjun is in a listen only mode. Alex, can you please read this?
Sure. Protection from intruders, birds and wild animals. Farmers put a scarecrow or bed drums to keep them away. Birds are useful for the crop before flowering and fruiting because they eat away insects, larvae, and worms which feed on the leaves. Birds are harmful only when the crop starts bearing fruits and seeds which are eaten away by the birds.
Correct. So basically, there are various ways we know how, the birds can damage crops. The moment there would be, the fruits coming up or, the grains would just pop up, there would be, birds in hordes and, aerially they would damage the crops. So they would basically try and eat away the damage, the yield, right? So one of the best ways is to put scarecrows, right? What are scarecrows, Kavya?
Scarecrows are basically like figures made out of things lying around to scare, because there are many birds that come and they peck on the seeds, so the plant can't grow. But the scarecrow keeps those birds away.
Correct. So basically, scarecrows are those, artificially made figures which are being made to wear, like proper dresses so that the birds and the animals confuse them and they may think that these are like real human beings standing there. And so this is like a permanent fixture which is being there put on the agricultural land till there's a harvest season. Now, beating of drums, this cannot be done on a daily or a regular basis, right? So for that, what can be done, what normally happens is that especially in the evening or at night when there are wild animals intruding the agricultural land, this is when the drums are beaten to scare the animal and keep them at bay, right? Certain birds are useful for the crop before flowering. Why? Who can answer this? Why are certain birds useful?
Because they take the seeds from one flower to another flower,
That is
like the
one.
anther and filament.
So both pollination as well as pest control can be done by the birds, right? So basically the insect larvae worms which feed on the leaves will be eaten away by the birds. Birds are harmful only when the crop starts bearing fruits and seeds. So this is what I was saying, that once there is seeds and fruits, then you'll have to keep the birds at bay. So normally what happens is that there are certain kind of artificial guns which are being used. This is being used more for the sound. There's a huge sound and there's a lot of smoke which comes out, but this doesn't do much damage to the animals, right? And in the village, there are many primitive ways, to drive the birds away. There are several ways that are used. Okay. Alex, are you there? Yeah, Veda, once more, if you could just read out this portion.
Protection from intruders. Rats and moles. They are killed with the use of poison, rodenticides,
Rodenticides, yeah.
locusts and grasshoppers. They are voracious eaters of leaves, buds, and even stems. Locusts are small, brown, and deep yellow in color, and grasshoppers are green and big.
Correct. So basically rats and moles, this is very dangerous because, you really can't see them. These rodents are very, very quick, very fast, and mostly they dig burrows, and they're found under the soil. So how to hunt them and how to kill them? So specifically for them, and they are very fond of grains. Once the grain season is on, the grains are on, they'll come. So you'll have to use rodenticides again. Rodenticides are those chemical, synthetic agents which kill. Sides means to kill. Rodents means like moles, rats, mice and all. Will kill the rodents, right? Locust is again a very commonly found insect, right? So locusts and grasshoppers, they are voracious eaters of leaves, buds, and even stems at times. They're voracious eaters. If affected once, it really can leave the entire land barren, maybe in a matter of a week, right? So one has to get rid of locusts and grasshoppers using pesticides or maybe insecticides, right? Okay. Protection from insects. So this is what I was discussing. Of course, you'll have to use insecticides like Baygon, Mortein, these two are name of companies, okay? But basically the chemicals used are malathion, DDT, BHC, methyl parathion. These are the chemicals. Please do not use these two, right? These are just brand names. The chemicals used are these. These are used to kill the insects. They're generously sprayed. And we know the after effects. This is not very healthy because, after all, it's all coming into our stomach, our food. So it's really not good. Okay. Now, there are certain invisible intruders like bacteria, fungi, and virus. And this, once they get into the crops, it is really, really, really dangerous because, internally they do the damage. You get to see the symptoms very late. You first see when you see the symptoms, by then actually it's late, right? So one has to again generally use chemicals like Bordeaux mixture, Disistone, dilute solution of copper sulfate, which is also known as blue vitriol, right? The blue vitriol especially acts as a very good antifungal, which is also, commercially known as SAF. SAF is a fungicide which is available and which is, used very commonly in plants, right? So these are basically, you really don't have much biochemical or biological, pest control or fungicides. They all are chemicals, and it's really sad that one has to use them.